Hi there, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be fixing it's a crawfish etouffee. It's made the old-fashioned way, and this pot was given to me by my mother-in-law. She used to cook hers in this, and she cooked many other things in this, and she gave it to me when the handle broke. I don't have a lid to it, but we're going to get started. We're going to need a stick of butter. We're going to take it and we're going to put it in the pot. I turned my heat up. I have an electric stove, so I turned it up to 6. I'll leave it there pretty much through the whole duration of the cooking. When I feel that the butter is getting a little bit too hot, I might pull it off of the eye and then put it back on once it cools down a little bit. But I put my stick of butter in there, and then we'll put in garlic. If you hear a little noise in the background, that's Dusty. Took me a minute to get the garlic open, and with garlic I use it's crawfish, so they're very light, like shrimp is, so you don't use very much garlic, about that much, about a quarter of a teaspoon. I'll put that in. And then, as I showed you before, you'll use a whole bell pepper, and then you'll put that in. And then I chop up a whole onion, and then I'll put the whole onion in, because the onion is what's going to give you the caramelization. It's going to give you the beautiful color of it's kind of sorta a roux, but it's not. I don't know how to explain it, what the gravy will be, but it's really good. And I'll just let this simmer down. And it'll take, oh my goodness, it'll probably take half an hour, 45 minutes. Because this is aluminum pot, I get bamboo. I use a bamboo spoon. Well, this is kind of like a spatula type spoon. You can get these anywhere. I'll put a link to them on this post. You can get them through Amazon. You can get a pack of 3 or a pack of 6. They're really good. They're very versatile, and they don't stain as much like wood does. Wood tends to stain quite a bit, and I don't particularly care for that. So that's why I kind of like bamboo. And bamboo is also, it's more sustainable than wood, where we can grow bamboo a lot faster than we can grow a tree. So this helps save the planet. So I have switched everything to bamboo. Once the wood spoons, that's my last wood spoon I've had. The wood spoons, I probably had them about 10 years, I guess. And as they gotten old, I've kind of gotten rid of them. And I just kind of let this stir around. When I have big chunks like this, I usually take them out. Nobody wants to eat a huge chunk, but I'll just let this simmer and cook. And it like I was saying, it'll take about 45 minutes to cook. And I constantly stir it, because when you're constantly stirring it, you're keeping it from burning at any locations. And the butter's pretty good about not burning when you have, for some reason, they just caramelize and make a good color with the onions. It's a great dish. It's an old dish. This dish my mother-in-law, I think, learned from either her best friend or her mom or her dad. I'm not sure where she learned, or her stepmother. I'm not quite sure how she learned to fix it. And I never really had the opportunity to fix it with her, but I would sit and I would watch her. She was such an amazing cook, and I dedicate my YouTube recipes to her, because she taught me so much about cooking. Even though I didn't really cook with her, I was always looking over her shoulder watching and learning, because I thought she just had such a way with cooking, and I've tried to incorporate that. And I try not to take shortcuts. A lot of people can take shortcuts with this, and they'll use soups or something like that. but every time every time I cook this recipe, I think about my mother-in-law and how much she impacted my life in a time when I was in, I got married and I didn't have any family where I was at. I was by myself. My family had moved away and they lived in Florida and New York, and she became my mom and she helped me with a lot of stuff. And this is one thing that she really helped me with, is cooking and learning how to cook and how to cook good stuff that was wholesome and healthy. This, I can't really say it's healthy, but it's really good. I know I have kind of adjusted it for keto. There's not much that I can do to take out of this to make it keto friendly. It does have about between a fourth and a half a cup of flour that I will use once I get these onions caramelized really good. I will put the flour in them. I've tried it with several different flours and it doesn't work as well. So I've kind of stuck with just regular flour. I don't use self-rising, it's just plain unbleached flour. That's all I use. And I put it in and I just cook it down, and you'll see as I get through this recipe, as we work on creating it. It's starting to really start to cook up now. Starting to get really good. You can smell it through the whole house when you start cooking this. It's not necessarily a keto friendly food, but you can make it more adjustable to a keto diet. Instead of using brown rice or white rice or basmati rice, most of the time I use basmati or brown rice. I don't use white rice because I don't like the texture of it, and my family prefers basmati rice because it's so much fluffier. But what you can do is you can take this and pour it over cauliflower rice, and it is absolutely amazing. It adds a whole nother level to the dish, and it's so much more flavorful, because I'll take cauliflower rice that has bell pepper and minced bell pepper and minced onion in it, and it flavors the cauliflower, and I'll add salt, and I'll add a little bit of pepper. Now we don't use black pepper, we use red pepper to season everything. Black pepper, we have found, causes more health issues than what it's worth for our family. But you can add black pepper if you want when you're cooking and steaming. But I'll have another video where I show you how to make cauliflower rice that you could pour over this in another video, and I'll link it with the video below on this one. But we're just going to let these cook. It's going to take a while. Like I've said, it'll take about 25 minutes for these to cook. But this pot that I'm cooking in, my mother-in-law gave me this pot years ago. I've had it about 25 years. She broke the lid. She dropped the lid and it broke. It had a magnolite lid, and at that time you couldn't buy just the handle. So she was going to toss it, and I asked her if I could have it, and she gave it to me. And this is the pot that I have always cooked crawfish etouffee in. I cook crawfish etouffees in this pot, and I cook if I cook a pork roast or a beef roast, I cook it in this pot. And I basically cook it the same way as instead of using butter though, I'll use water, and I'll cook my roast. But I cook my roast in this, and every time I cook in this pot, I remember her, and all the times I would look over her shoulder watching her cook and learning. I didn't have much opportunity to cook with her, but I was always in that kitchen looking over her shoulder and looking over her daughter's shoulders, learning what they did so that I could go home and fix it for Johnny. And that's my husband, fix it for my family as well. And you can see how it's starting to it's not starting to crystallize, but it's starting to become clear. That means it's starting to get soft, and that's what we want it to get soft. We don't want it to be clear, we want it to have some color to it. And you're going to see how the butter will even change colors, and so will the onion. They'll change color because of the sugar in the onion. And that's why this isn't keto so much, because of the flour and the onion, because onion has carbs in it and it has sugar, and that's what actually causes it to brown. But it's coming along nicely. I have catfish in the oven that's going to go with this dish. My husband likes to take the crawfish and put it over his catfish, and he likes to eat it like that. And that's really good too. I just like to have mine on the side. But my onions they're getting there. Onions and bell pepper, they're starting to get there. Still going to take a little bit of time. While I'm waiting for this, I'm going to start my rice. It's starting to change colors, and that means you can see on the bottom of the pan how it's starting to get brown. That means it's starting to crystallize and turn into a deeper consistency. It's starting to, I guess you could say, it's starting to cook and brown. It's like the flavor juices are starting to settle. You can see that the onions are they're clear, and the bell pepper is starting to get much lighter. Some of them are getting a little bit darker, that are the darker part of the bell pepper to really cook well now. We're still not to that point. We're probably a little over halfway to the consistency that we're going to want to cook these down, because our goal is to have a dark gravy, not a white gravy. The crawfish is going to give it a pinkish color, but when you cook the onions and you get this browning, that's going to give you your dark color, almost like a roux. It's not going to taste like a roux. It's going to taste totally different. But you're going to have the same process. You're going to cook the flour in with the onion and the bell pepper and the garlic and the oil, all this. And I'm not the best cook in the world. I just observe a lot and I learn from others, and I try to use what I find that is really good. And I'll ask the chef in a restaurant how they cook things. It embarrasses my husband, but you know, if he likes something, I like to try and mimic what they fix. Like he loves the New Orleans pasta at Cheddar's, but it upsets his stomach every time he eats it. So I've learned how to make that pasta and make it a little bit healthier and a little bit less upsetting for him, to where now he can eat it, and it's just as good, if not better, than what they fix, because I really add a little bit more to it. Like I'll cook different sausages and try it different ways. But it's starting to really, you can start to see it's getting a little bit brown. That's exactly where we want it to go. We want it to start browning up and getting that beautiful color, to where our crawfish etouffee is going to have a beautiful color. A white crawfish etouffee just doesn't look appealing as it does as one that has a darker color. The darker color makes it much more appealing. But you can see at this point, I usually will stir it continuously. I won't really leave it, because it would take seconds for it to actually burn. Some of these onions are so close to being done that if they sit in that oil just too long without moving, they're going to burn. And you don't want that. You don't want burnt pieces. So when you get it to this point, you want to keep stirring. And it's probably, you're going to have to stir about 10 minutes. You know, pull the onions off the side, because they will start to burn, and you don't want that either. So I like to, you can see how all these over here are just kind of getting quite a bit darker than the rest. So we're going to pull those down, put them down here where they can cook. Oh, there's a onion peel. We're going to take you out. There we go. We're going to drop you off. You're not needed. But you can see how the colors are changing, and it smells just wonderful. I will do this here, and like when I'm cooking a pot of beans, I'll do the same. I won't use as much oil. I'll use maybe 1/4 a stick of butter, and I'll cook my onions and bell peppers like this before I put them in my beans, and oh man, they make it so good. But it's starting to get a nice consistency. If you like my channel, make sure you subscribe. And then hit that little bell icon. I post things. I try to post things once a week. My cooking videos are going to be a lot longer than the rest because I'm showing you guys step by step. Step by step. I'm not going to leave the steps out. As you can see, these are starting to get really nice. You can see my pot starting to, this is starting to crystallize on the pot. And that's where your flavor is. Right there, that's your flavor. And that flour is going to take that up, and man, oh day, it's going to be good. I think of all the Cajun dishes that there are, this and boudin is my favorite. I haven't quite conquered boudin yet. I bought all the stuff to make boudin, but I have the sausage stuffer, I have the recipes. I got the recipe from the lady that makes boudin for Don's Seafood in Louisiana. And if you ever go to Louisiana, always, oh my goodness, go to Don's Seafood, or you can go to Don's Specialty Meats. Man, they have some of the best boudin. You can also go to Billy's in Scott. Well, Don's and Billy's are right there in Scott. Man, there ain't nothing better than a link of boudin sandwiched between a piece of bread, and eat that for breakfast. When we lived in Louisiana, we would eat boudin for breakfast. We didn't care. You know, we really did. We were very odd people. We loved the dinner foods for breakfast and the breakfast foods for dinner sometimes. It was nothing for us to just grab a link of boudin, and a lot of times during the day for lunch, Johnny and I would go to Early's, or we would go to Don's when they had plate lunches out off of Highway 93 or 92. Not quite sure what it was. And we'd get us a plate lunch and split it. And because it was too much for both of us to eat. It was a big plate lunch. And we would do that. And I learned how to cook a lot of different foods just by asking those ladies that cook those plate lunches. I would ask them, how did you make this? How did you make this? How did you make this? And sometimes they would tell me, sometimes they wouldn't. You know, sometimes they really didn't have the time because they were fixing probably 400 or 500 plate lunches for lunch. That's a lot of food to cook. You can see my onions, how they're changing their color. So this is the point where we're going to add our flour. I'm going to grab my flour and show you how much. Here's my flour. This is about a 1/2 cup. I'm not going to add all of this at one time. This is a measuring cup that is in the rice cookers that you can get in the stores. And that's kind of, it just stays in my flour bin. But you can see I just kind of spread it around. And then I'll leave, you know, a little bit out. See how I just kind of spread it around. And then I'll just mix it in. And you see how this is getting to have a dark gray. Well, it's not dark, but those onions really brighten up with color. And see, you can take this off of here. This is why it's important to use bamboo or wood, because you don't want to scratch. Aluminum was found years ago to actually be a major factor in causing Alzheimer's and dementia. So that's why this pot is only used for certain dishes. But you can see how that's really coming up nicely. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my water. You're going to need some water. And I use hot water. 4 cups of water. You can see my cup. I'll get it quite enough water to where I don't have to come back to the sink again. I usually do this earlier than this, but and I'm gonna get my crawfish ready. Let me see. See how this is getting darker? And I should have been standing here stirring it, because see, my onions got a little darker than what I wanted to. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pull it back here and pull it off the eye for a second while I get the scissors to cut open my crawfish. Up here, we don't have the luxury of getting fresh crawfish, which I miss a lot. Now I'm going to pull this back on the stove, get it back up to par. I took my heat down to medium. And you can see my flour is starting to turn like a light. It's kind of light. So at this point, I'm going to start pouring my water in. I'm going to pour it in kind of quick. And then I'm going to start stirring, because I want to cool off those onions to where they quit cooking. Because I don't want them to get any darker, because they're quite dark enough. They're actually too dark for this dish. And I poured about half that water, so I poured a little over 1.5 cups of water. I had 3.5 cups, and I now have 1 2/3. So you can see how it's thickening up. So I'm going to add a little more water, because it's going to thicken up too fast. And once you thicken it up really thick, you can't add more water, because then it's going to clump on you. Pull my onions down. Alrighty, see, it's all nice and creamy. I don't have any flour lumps in it. It just turns out really good when I'm doing this. Now's when I'm going to start adding my seasonings. We're going to add salt. I'm going to add salt. I'm a big proponent of using pink salt because of the minerals that's in it. It's very beneficial for us. So, and this sounds like a lot of salt, but really it's not. It's maybe about 1/2 teaspoon. This grinder just doesn't grind as much at one time. It's just an older grinder that I've had for quite a while. Then I'm going to add, this is Tony Chachere's with no salt. I buy this every time I go back to Louisiana, and I add it's about 1 tablespoon of this, but you can season this to your taste. I buy this stuff in the gallon. And so I'm going to add that, and now I'm going to start stirring this in. And this is going to give your etouffee some color too. You know, if you want to, you can add a little paprika. That's going to pinken it up a little bit. But I don't want to cook my spices. I want to flavor my food with them. And you can see how this is getting to be a really nice gravy. And so I'm going to add a little bit of water. It's a little bit past the time I would add water, but it's thickening it up. It's just a little bit too thick. And the more flour you add, the thicker your gravy's going to be. You want to be real careful. It's better to have too little flour than too much, because you can always cook the water down, but you can't take the lumps out. It's really difficult. Alrighty, now is the point where we're going to add our crawfish. And this doesn't take long once you get to this point, because these are already cooked. Put that in the trash. My dogs love crawfish as much as we do. I find the bag under one of the beds, so we don't want that. But I'll start breaking up my crawfish. I had to choose frozen. These are defrosted, but some of them are still a little bit not defrosted completely through. But this only takes usually 5 or 6 minutes to make this. Once these go in the pot, I usually won't cook them, maybe 7 or 8 minutes. If they're completely defrosted, 7 or 8 minutes. because when you cook them too long, they get rubbery, and you don't want them to. You don't want rubbery crawfish. If you're going to eat a delicacy like this, you want to eat good crawfish. So my suggestion is be careful. Don't cook them too much. Most of the crawfish that you buy in stores now are already pre-cooked, so you don't have to worry about cooking them because they come in a shell and they have to be. They're like shrimp. See, here's what. Well, come here. You see here? Here is crawfish. This is what they look like. They're like little bitty shrimp, but they're different. They're freshwater. And they have a body that's about this long, and they have to be, this is their tail meat, and you have to take that out of their shell. So they've already been peeled and deveined. So you have to boil them. The method of cooking these are they boil them in great big pots. If you've ever heard of crawfish boil, well, when the leftovers are made, we all sit and we peel all what's left, and then we put it in Ziploc bags and we save it for days just like this. That way we can enjoy it when they're not in season. Crawfish are in season in the early part of the year. During the later part of the year, it's too hot, and from what I understood from Johnny's dad, they dig deeper in the soil to stay cool. I don't know if I'm right or not. I would have to ask the Cajun to find out. He used to do crawfish ponds, and he had that's how we got our crawfish. Then when we lived at home, is he had his own ponds that he kept the crawfish in and grew them. Don't ask me how they did that. I just know they were in these great big ponds that were about ankle deep. And the water moccasins love to live there, so I never did really go. Johnny would go. They would go early in the mornings, real early, and get the crawfish and bring them back. You could drive in South Louisiana and Acadiana, around Lafayette Parish, New Iberia, and you could see the crawfish fields. And it looks like little grass is growing, and that's where they grow crawfish when they have water in them. The ponds have water in them all the time. I think they drain them in the winter, but I think the rest of the time of the year they do actually have crawfish in them. I'm not sure, or they have water in them, sorry. But you see how nice this looks? This is how Miss Johnny, I called her Miss Johnny, Johnny's mother, this is how she made this crawfish for her family. And I learned from her, and I would never change the way I fix this. I even fix it in her pot to honor her. She was an amazing woman, and so wise and so knowledgeable, and such a good cook. I've said that before. She was such an amazing cook. Oh man, I wished I had her recipes, more of her recipes, to where I could put them on here so other people could get a taste of what her recipes were. Now with this particular recipe, you can use this with crawfish, you can use it with shrimp. You get the smaller shrimp. I would suggest using the smaller shrimp because it's more bite-sized, but you can use it with any size shrimp you want. You can take this and take fish. I've taken fish and crab meat and shrimp and made an etouffee with that. What I did with my fish, and I'll put this on the YouTube channel too, is to where I broil the fish and then I flake it into here, because it'll just fall apart if you try to cook it into a dish like this. The fish is going to fall apart, and then you're just going to have like little pieces of nothing. So I pre-cook my fish and I just put it in at the end, but I'll cook my shrimp and my crab meat in it, so that way the juice has flavor. But this is it. This is how it's done. It's a beautiful dish. At the end of my cooking, I add a little bit of Tabasco. When I get it to this point, I'll sprinkle in a few to taste, however you like it, and then I put this on the table, and then whoever wants a little bit more, they can have a little bit more. And then I just kind of mix it in, and that finishes off this dish. This dish is completely done now. You can see the beautiful color that it has. I'm going to turn it off, And we're going to plate this up and show you what this looks like. This is how crawfish etouffee looks when it's done. There you go. Bon appetit!